What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does the day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them and you deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this birth story family. You guys, my book is out. It is out in the world. I cannot believe it. I have been writing it for several years, and it's just mind-blowing. Birth Story, Pregnancy Guidebook and Journal is a one-of-a-kind discovery into your pregnancy that provides you education through storytelling. So what's it really about? In the 16 years that I have served women with every personality type, I noticed there was a huge disconnect between what my clients were craving for childbirth education in a book and the books that were actually available on the market. There seemed to be unlimited resources if you are looking for an unmedicated birth or a natural birth or a home birth. But there just weren't a lot of resources for my clients who were part of the 92% of women birthing in a hospital and very much open to medical interventions like an epidural, nitrous oxide, and opioid medications. So I wrote that book to fill the gap for you. Week by week throughout your pregnancy, you will engage with material meant to educate and empower you as you plan for your own birth story. Hospital, medicated, unmedicated, or something in between. You are welcomed each week with a postcard from the womb, which is an adorable note from your baby about their miraculous development, as well as the amazing changes occurring within you. Then you are invited to use an uplifting birth affirmation and to respond to an introspective journaling prompt to document your feelings, curiosities, and wonders every single week. With room to memorialize your own birth story, this book will become a memory keeper and a legacy gift for your baby. You are encouraged to read one of my favorite birth stories each week, filled with childbirth education, tidbits, and explanations of important medical terms and procedures. These are real-life accounts shared with permission from the births that I've attended during my career as a doula. And I gave you a great mix. In the 42-week guide to your pregnancy and 42 birth stories, 7 of them end in cesarean section. About half are unmedicated and the other half are medicated deliveries. This is a judgment-free book. So take what you need from each element and leave the rest. Okay, are you ready to buy? I would love for you to go to birthstory.com and buy it directly from me. But I totally get it if you're an Amazon girl. You can head to amazon.com and just type in Birth Story Pregnancy, and the book should pop up. I'll deliver it straight to your doorstep. And I would venture to say that you might be an audiobook kind of woman because you're listening to a podcast. So if you would prefer to listen to this book, then I have recorded it and it is available for download at audible.com or on your Audible app. Thank you for being part of the Birth Story community. I am so excited for you to have this book in your hand once you've purchased it and it has arrived. I hope that you will give me your thoughts and feedback, and don't forget to take a selfie with your book and post it on Instagram and tag at Birth Story Podcast. Episode 5. Woo! So today could not be more exciting for me because I get to share with you the journey of one of my very best friends, Sean, and her identical twin pregnancy and birth. And I was also her doula. So This is such a cool story, and I hope that you learn so much, especially if you are carrying multiples today. Hey, everybody. I'm in the podcast studio with Shawn today. She is going to be the very first interview of 2019 to talk about a multiples birth. So again, I'm Heidi Campbell with the Birth Story Podcast. Welcome, Shawn.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, okay, let's go back to tell me a little bit about like how old are your twins and a little bit about like who you are and like why we want to listen to the story.
Sure. So I am a college professor here in Charlotte. I teach at Queen's University of Charlotte. My twins are now 6. They just celebrated their 6th birthday this past December. And they are my only. When you have twins out the gate, I feel like half of the parents of twins stop once they have the twins first. And so it's been a wild ride. They are identical twin boys, and every bit of boy DNA is in those kids. They are wild, energetic, don't ever stop. So I am a tired twin mom, but I am a very happy, blessed twin mom too. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. And then your husband, I'm just going to interject, is Bo.
Yep.
And what does Bo do for a living?
Bo works in the restaurant industry with Noble's Food Group. He is basically, I can't remember, COO? What did I say? Yeah.
Chief Operating Officer.
Chief Operating Officer.
I know what he does.
I know. He's
for
the
a
COO.
living.
He doesn't really... We don't like mentioning it that much, but he's been in the restaurant industry for our entire life. Bo and I dated for 8 years, and we have been married. We're celebrating our 10th year, 11th year this coming April. So we've known each other for a really, really long time.
And you're pretty young, so most of your life you guys have known each other. So
before our 21st birthdays.
So let's go back to like early marriage. So you said that you've been married for almost 11 years, but the boys are only 6.
Yeah.
So did you have like a long journey to get pregnant, or what did that look like for you guys?
We did not have a long journey to get pregnant. When I first was married to Bo, I had started teaching in the public school system, and I was part of a group called Lateral Entry. So I never had like really secure footing in that necessarily. And Pete Gorman was the superintendent at the time, and there was a huge riff of layoffs, and I was part of that. So right when we were talking about maybe starting a family was when financially things kind of caved out from underneath us. So we waited to have children to start our family, but it actually was a really nice incubation period. Even though we dated for a long time, we were married for about 5 years, and that let us sort of settle into the patterns of marriage and figure out how communication in marriage is like wildly different. And I think it helped us grow up a little bit, so that having twins, it wasn't like this huge shell shock. I can't imagine having them younger when I was trying to start my career. I'm grateful that my career was a little settled in some ways when I had them. We were not trying, we were practicing, and it was one big old oops.
Okay, so tell me the difference between trying and practicing for a baby. You have to define this for our audience.
So we would not, I guess people would say we were trying because we weren't using any sort of birth control method other than the calendar method. And I think ultimately Bo kind of was like, you know what, let's do this. Who cares? Let's try. And so the pull-out method, we were using the calendar and the pull-out method, and Bo flipped the script on me one night and did not pull out. So I made a joke. I was like, in a few weeks, this could become something. And he laughed, and he was like, well, it's about time. He made this sort of joke. And I remember very vividly, at the time, I had just been laid off from working at the high school, and I was part-time everything. So I was adjuncting at Queen's. I was pet sitting. I was all of these things. And I was getting ready to take a group of students to Costa Rica for over a month. And I didn't feel great, but I wasn't sick. And I because I'm a dual citizen, I was born in Costa Rica. I knew that I could go and get checked out in Costa Rica. So I wanted to rule out a few things in case what I was having was something chronic. I was concerned. I was really lethargic.
Because you didn't have health insurance, right?
At the time, I did not have health insurance.
Okay.
That's right. So I was feeling really lethargic. It was like mandatory naps in the afternoon, which is not me. I'm a very energetic type of go person. I had been dog sitting and I just didn't have any energy. So I was like, well, I'll take a pregnancy test to rule it out. I'm also not a good tracker of my period. Like, I'm the worst at that. So I was like, well, I think I'm supposed to be on my period, but I don't know. It's all, I was like, I'll just rule this out. I'm leaving in Costa Rica in 2 days. And so I did the thing. I peed on the stick at this guy's house that I was dog sitting for. And I remember seeing the second line come up faintly and calling my sister. And I was like, you can't really see it. She's like, you're saying that you see a second line. I go, well, not really. She's like, if you are saying that there's any sort of second line, you're pregnant. And she went into full freak out mode. So I hang up with her and then I called our good friend Tara and I was like, Tara, I'm going to send you a picture of this. Pretty sure I don't see a second line. And Tara, who's more straightforward and calm and never gets excited, she's like, you're pregnant, dude. And I was like, oh, okay. And so no insurance. And like, I remember calling you doula Heidi was like, Heidi, I'm pregnant and I'm going to be gone for a month. And can you, I don't know what I need to be doing. Can you do that? Cause I'm getting on a plane with students in 2 days. And I was like, hey babe, we're pregnant. I'll see you in a month. And I literally got on the plane and I was sick as a dog for that first trimester. And it was really hard to, keep that secret from the students. I literally was throwing up every meal and I lost 10 pounds in the first trimester. And I was,
wow.
Yeah, it was, it was bad.
That is a lot. So for all of our listeners out there, I also called our friend Tara and had that similar conversation of like, I think that there's a second line when I was pregnant when I first. And so for anyone listening out there, if you see a second line, you are pregnant.
It doesn't matter how faint it is. And I think part of
if there's
it is
any second line.
Right.
Yes.
I think part of it is like, you don't believe it. Right. So it's this notion of like, I'm not seeing what I'm seeing clearly. Right.
Yeah.
And I was
going to say, how many tests did you take?
I just did 2.
You
so
did
the
2.
first one I did in the afternoon, and my sister, who was insistent, was like, take another one in the morning. Please tell me you bought a 2-pack. I was like, yeah, I mean, sure. So I took one in the morning, and within, I want to say like a minute and a half, that second line showed up, and it was bright pink. And I was like, we are pregnant. And clearly, at the time, I didn't know it, but it was those twin hormones running through me. So it was like, oh yeah, you're like doubly pregnant.
Yeah. So let's talk about, you're in Costa Rica, you're with the students, you're sick, you've lost 10 pounds.
Yeah.
But because you're from Costa Rica,
yes,
I know a little bit of the story.
You know a lot of the story.
And so I want you to share with everybody that's listening, like, what it looks like to take your Costa Rican family to the doctor in Costa Rica.
Okay. So I get, because I'm a Costa Rican citizen and because Costa Rica has amazing healthcare, it was free healthcare for me, but the privatized healthcare is really cheap there too. So I went and I had my blood work drawn, and my aunt and my cousin booked an appointment with a gynecologist, and we went. And so in Costa Rica, it's not like in America where you're waiting in a waiting room and then you go into this exam room and then the doctor comes in. This is like, I never saw a nurse. I went straight into the doctor's office, and it's like set up like a regular office. He's got his desk, he's got his computer. He took a few minutes to get to know me. And then he said, all right, well, we'll go on the other side of this partition. And so you just imagine like a half wall, and there was an exam table right there. And so my aunt and my cousin were on the other side of the partition, but clearly you can hear everything, right? And bless this man, he spoke in English, I think to afford me a little bit of privacy, because he knew that those weren't my immediate. My dad was not going to show up to this thing because clearly, modest man that he is, that was too close to, my naked vagina or something. And then my mom is agoraphobic. So this was not necessarily an ideal situation. My husband, Bo, is, stateside, and I'm getting this checkup to kind of confirm the pregnancy. And I'm like, I think I'm 5 weeks pregnant, whatever. So I'm on the table. He's doing the vaginal, what's it called?
Ultrasound?
Ultrasound, yes. And he's like, yep, this baby is measuring beautifully at 5 weeks. You're correct. Look, and he's showing me this gorgeous little healthy peanut of a baby on the ultrasound. And everything is sort of, he's speaking in Spanish and English, Spanglish, all this stuff. And then he pauses and he goes, ups. And the beautiful thing about this is he recorded the ultrasound so that I could show Bo later so that we could share that moment together. And he's like, it's twins. And it was like, say what? And so he takes the wand right inside of me and I don't know what he did. He moved it and he's like, see that? I go, yeah. He goes, that's baby A. I was like, okay. And then he moves the wand. He goes, see that? I was like, uh-huh. He goes, that's baby V. And I was like, I believe you. I'm not trying to insult you, but I don't believe this. And so he had to keep doing it. And so
not comfortable also, vaginal ultrasound.
Right. And I was right at 10 weeks. So this is not normally when you would have.
You thought 5 weeks, but really you were 10 weeks.
I arrived. I was 5 weeks pregnant. I think it's been a month since I've been in country. I think I'm 10 weeks pregnant. That is correct. So this is not a normal time when you would have this type of exam. Meanwhile, my aunt and my cousin, who are like clutching hands and like you hear them squeal and then they go, can we come over there? And I was like, sure. Because at this point, everything's so laughable and surreal anyway. So they come around to the other side. And in Spanish, they're like, we're very Catholic. So they're praising God and thanking the heavens and, Ave Maria and all of this stuff. And I'm like laughing / crying because it's just so surreal. We weren't trying for this pregnancy. It was not exactly the best of times to have it, but it felt really serendipitous, right? Like my first checkup was in a country where I could afford to do it. I don't know what I would have done if I was still stateside without any insurance. And I would have figured it out, but this was...
So in this ultrasound, one of the questions I have is that there's all different types of twins, even identicals.
Yeah.
So tell me about like the sacs, the placentas,
they were monodi.
Okay.
And so because of that unique time frame, he was able to tell very clearly that they were identical.
So explain to everyone what monodi means.
Monodi, 2 babies, they're sharing. So they shared one placenta. They were in their own sacs. They had their own amniotic sacs or when your water breaks. So they were in their own little sacs. And so that type of pregnancy, identical twins, is a 3 in 1,000 chance of having identical twins. It's not hereditary. That's one of the questions I get all the time. Oh, do twins run in your family? Fraternal twins do, but identical twins have nothing to do with genes.
It's just with the egg splitting.
The egg splitting. And that's like a Russian roulette that Bo played that night.
And then your twins have red hair. So I think I remember you telling us one time that like the chances of having identical twins that had like red hair and green eyes was like 1 in...
Blue eyes.
And blue eyes. 1 in 10,000 or
something crazy. Red hair and blue eyes is the rarest hair eye color combination in the world. Redheads make up less than 2% of the population. So on Facebook, I had made this joke like, I have redheads. They're less than 2% of the population. They're identical, which is a 3 in 1,000 chance to have them. I said, I wonder what the odds are. And of course, because I teach at a university, one of my colleagues was like, not to geek out on you, but it's actually like a 0.0 something chance to actually have identical twins who are redheads, particularly with blue eyes. Like that.
Did you buy lottery tickets to celebrate?
They were the lottery. They
were my
winning.
So how did you tell your husband that you were having twins? Because he wasn't with you at this appointment.
Right. So he actually had come down to Costa Rica at the end of the trip. The students flew back. He came down for a week. And I still had two days at the end of my trip that I wanted to spend with family. Again, I'd booked these tickets long before we knew we were pregnant. So he comes down. I'm throwing up every day. The pregnancy becomes real to him. Like he sees how in bad shape I am and I have food aversions and I'm like, you can't eat that around me. And, that's not who I am. I eat everything. And so it became really real to him. But then he flies back. He knows that I have this appointment the next day. So I call him again. We're in the car with my aunt, with my cousin, who I love very dearly, but not who I'd want to have this conversation in the presence of. So I call Bo. He's waiting. He knows what time it is. He's like, hey, how'd it go? I was like, it's good. Where are you? He's like, I'm at work. I was like, oh, like in your office work or like you walk in the floor because he works in a restaurant, right? And he's like, I'm down at the bar. I was like, okay, can you sit down? He's like, is everything okay with the baby? I was like, yeah, everything is fine. There's just 2 of them. It's totally fine. And it was dead silent. And I remember taking the phone and like looking like, did we lose the international call? I'm driving, in the city of San Jose. And I was like, Bo? And he's like, yeah, I'm here. I was like, okay. He's like, I'm excited. He's like, this is a lot to take in. I was like, yeah, okay. All right, I'll talk to you. So you're going to pick me up tomorrow? He's like, yeah. And that was it. Like, I think we were both so spooked that we just didn't talk about it. By the time I landed, he had researched, in his cute sort of way of loving, he had researched everything there was to research about a twin pregnancy, and then grilled me. He's like, we got to figure out how you're going to eat more, because you have to have 600 calories more for a twin pregnancy than your regular pregnancy. He's like, I don't think you're drinking enough water. I didn't see you drink that much water in Costa Rica. You need to be having double the amount of water. Like, it was all facts. He was the one who researched the fact that identical twins are not hereditary. So he became this like little Rolodex of information.
He was your week by week guide to pregnancy.
He was like, oh, the baby's going to be the size of this. Babies, right? We were still. So yeah,
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so your pregnancy. Tell me about it. Were you relatively healthy? Like, how did everything go?
So the first trimester I was sick. That's not surprising given twins. I think most twin moms will tell you or report that they had a really sort of nauseous first trimester. There's two of them.
Did you take medicine?
I did not.
Okay.
Nope. No. I had food aversions. I doubled down on fruit and avocado. That's what tasted good to me. So I didn't take medicine. I just kind of worked my way through it. By the end of the trimester, I started to feel better. I'd still have waves of nausea, but I wasn't actively throwing up. After that, it was sort of a textbook pregnancy. Because they were identical twins and because they were monodi twins, we were monitored a lot. And since they're my only babies, I don't know any other way. Like, my friends would be like, oh, I finally get a sonogram. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because every other week I was having sonograms, pictures taken of the babies. So it was highly monitored. There's a risk of twin-to-twin transfusion with identical twins that they really want to closely look for. There was a little bit of a scare towards third trimester because they tell you to watch out for rapid weight gain because that is a sign of twin-to-twin transfusion. And that happened. And so one of the ways to avoid that, if it's too soon, they go ahead and give the baby steroids and they just inject that. If it's around 37, 36 weeks, they try to push to deliver. This was before that. I think it was right around 33 weeks. So that was a big scare. And there's really no way of finding out. And they had offered at that point to drain some of my fluid. And I asked, like, what benefit does that have for the babies? They said, no, none. It's just to make you more comfortable. And I was sort of a very pro least medical interventions possible. So I turned that down, which meant I was huge. Like, I have pictures of me next to Santa. I delivered in December, where my belly is like twice the size of dress up Santa. I'd walk into a grocery store and people were like, there's triplets in there. She's going to have her baby right here. But so they did the steroids and that was it. They sent me home. And then at 37 weeks, I went in. At that point, I was going in every week for checkups. My blood pressure was a little high. And there were signs of preeclampsia in my urine sample. At that point, my doctor was like, you know what? Let's go ahead and have these babies. Let's, what's the word I'm looking for? Induce. Yeah, thank you. So I had not had any Braxton Hicks. I had not had any false labor. I had no inkling of what a contraction felt like. So at that point, I kind of knew that the birth plan that Bo and I envisioned was going to probably be out the window.
So I know what that was because I was your doula.
Yeah.
But why don't you tell everybody like what you were planning for your twin birth?
So I was really enthralled with the idea of a water birth. I loved the notion of peace and calm that would bring to both me and Bo. Bo is a little gun shy at hospitals. He has fainted before at the sign of a needle. I wanted a space that was going to provide as much peace as possible for everybody involved. And I'm also just more along the like granola hippie side, if you will. I prefer less medical interventions possible. I'm a believer in Western medicine, but I think there can be a balance. And so I had wanted a water birth or at least, be able to move around, be able to squat, all those things. I was prepped pretty early that may not happen. 50% half of all twin births end up in C-sections. That's just the reality. Full term for twins is considered 37 weeks. And so I knew I had to really advocate for myself. But the preeclampsia kind of took my bargaining chip off the table, because at that point, preeclampsia, the only way to get rid of it for the mom,
is delivery.
Right? So at that point, it was like...
And for anyone that's listening here too, like, I think it's really important. I think preeclampsia gets thrown around and people aren't really sure what the definition of that is. They know that it's linked to high blood pressure, but high blood pressure is just actually one symptom. So eclampsia actually means seizures or convulsions. Right. So preeclampsia means seizures or convulsions.
It's one of the leading killers of women, maternal health in the world.
I don't think that people know enough about it. So that's why I just wanted to interject. One of the symptoms is high blood pressure. One of the symptoms is high uric acid. One of the symptoms, protein or creatinine in your urine. They look at the ratio of the uric acid to the creatinine. And so they also look at things like blurry vision and headaches. There's a multitude of symptoms that could give you the diagnosis of preeclampsia. But I think it's important to not dismiss the seriousness of it, because I don't think a lot of people realize that eclampsia means seizures and convulsions. So that we're trying to not have that happen, you know, and the only cure, as you mentioned, is delivery.
I had blurry vision the week before, and it came in wafts. It was like in my peripheral vision. So I didn't know that was related. Right. So when we went in for 37 weeks and they said that, it was sort of like, okay, well, we're going to have to deliver these guys. And I knew at that point that my body wasn't physically ready to have them. I had no signs. There was nothing kind of...
You hadn't lost your mucus plug.
I hadn't lost my mucus plug. I was still, pretty mobile for how huge I'm waddling.
I will tell listeners that you were still quite high too. So the babies hadn't
dropped.
You hadn't experienced that, big drop. And because there was also a lot that fluid was.
Yes.
I will.
About the fluid.
I will. Well, we're going to have a story about the fluid in just here coming up in a minute. Hey, it's Heidi. I'm interrupting the podcast to let you know about a free resource that I've created for you at birthstory.com. All you have to do is go to birthstory.com and then click the tab that says The Workbook. Once you put your email address in, an entire resource library of all of my secret sauces are available to you for free as my thank you for listening to the Birth Story podcast and being part of this community. At birthstory.com, under the workbook, you will find a birth plan template, articles on circumcision, delayed cord clamping, flipping a breech baby, packing your hospital bag, acupressure points, placenta encapsulation, and so much more. There are over 20 free articles ready for you to download at birthstory.com. Now let's get back to this amazing episode. So this was like the afternoon. Of what day was this? December?
The boys were born on the 12th, so it was 3 full days before that.
Okay.
They were born like 12/18 on the 12th. So a few days before. And at that point, I kind of knew and resigned myself that things would not go as Bo and I had planned. I think I had that in the back of my head. Not that this was what was going to happen. I certainly didn't have a self-fulfilling prophecy about it, but I wanted to be open to possibility, and I wanted to be open to they'll get here how they get here, and it's going to be okay if I'm part of the statistic or if I beat it or whatever it might be, right? So they started with the Pitocin.
So wait, let's back up now. So you're at that appointment. Did they send you home to rest, or did you go straight to the hospital? No, they sent me to the hospital. They said, "Do you have a bag packed?" And we said, "Yeah, it's we've had it in the car for a few days." They're like, "Well, go ahead." And I was at the OBGYN that was connected to the hospital, so they're like, "Yeah, just go on up." And so we went. So for everyone listening, if you go to the doctor's office and they don't send you home, they send you right to the hospital, there's a little bit more of a sense of urgency than even you understand.
Yeah.
Because there are many inductions where they say, "Come back tomorrow."
Right.
But when they say scheduled. Go straight to the hospital, there are some things that are making them very uncomfortable.
I think the markers for preeclampsia were very clear, right? Very clear.
And they wanted to alleviate that.
And so, which I appreciate, right? I appreciate the attentiveness to that. So we went, they started Pitocin. I went back through the notes so Heidi was my doula, which is an amazing thing to have a doula. Even if you don't have the birth story that you want, or if your goal is to go natural and you don't go natural, having a doula in the room is amazing. It's an advocate. It's a voice that helps you. The multitude of ways that you helped was amazing. So we called Heidi. We're like, hey, you show up when you want. I don't think anything's happening, but they're going to induce a cervidil that evening. I was told I was in labor. I felt nothing, like nothing. At one point I was like, yeah, I'm starting to get some pain in my lower back. I'd rate it like a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10. And I remember people like in the room laughing because they're like, your contractions are 2 minutes apart. How do you not feel that? And I was like, I don't know.
There's a whole lot of fluid.
Yeah, I was like, it doesn't really hurt. I don't know.
And then we'll just back up really quick on cervidil. So cervidil is an induction medicine that they use that will soften and thin the cervix.
Yeah.
Many times with a first-time mom,
right,
our cervix has not effaced or thinned, and it hasn't dilated. And before we start all this Pitocin, it is really good to start with trying to open and soften the cervix. Now, if you had an opportunity to go home, your doula would have said, have tons of sex, because there are so many prostaglandins and semen that soften the cervix.
And I had been using that
evening primrose.
The evening primrose oil. So I think had started it the day before. So clearly, I was really pro natural, but understood that may not be the case. And
so they used the cervidil, and then maybe a couple hours later started the Pitocin.
Yes. Started at the lowest level, kept increasing it, actually went to the top that the nurses are allowed to go without a doctor coming in and okaying it. I only ever got to 70% effaced, and I only ever opened up 3 centimeters.
Okay.
So clearly my instinct that my body wasn't ready, I think.
Do you remember how many hours you were induced for?
It had to have been over 24, right?
When you got to 3 centimeters? Yep.
Yeah, it was over 24. Yep. And I know people were saying, look, the monitor, you're having a contraction. And they were 4 minutes apart and they were 2 minutes apart. And I was like, yeah, okay.
So do you remember ever really feeling that tightening or that squeezing? I remember being there with you and not really ever going into active labor.
I don't think I ever had active labor.
Yeah.
I never had an urgency to do anything with my body. Okay. Right. I mean, I had a desire to move around. I had a desire to not be. And the thing I'll tell you, so, there's 2 babies, there's 2 monitors. There was a mobile monitor unit that we had requested, but it wasn't there that day, right? They only have one because how many twin births or multiple births do you have? Yeah. And so each nurse had a different approach about it. And the first nurse was great. She let me move. And then she would just ask, in intervals, I think of half an hour and then maybe 20 minutes and then 15 to check the heart rates. And they were fine. In the evening, that nurse was so rigid. I was on my back sitting in that bed, and the only time she let me take the monitors off were to go pee. And so I'd fake having to pee just so that I could get up, and I would do
So you never got to take a shower or get into the bath?
I did shower. I didn't get to chill out in the bath. Okay. I was allowed a shower. Mm-hmm. So again, right, there was this rigidity that's not my personality. That's not how I wanted to deliver the boys. But I also, and I remember, I think, Heidi, you helped sort of advocate for that. This woman wasn't budging. And I think twin births are complications to begin with. I was considered a high-risk pregnancy from the get-go. The fact that they were identical twins increased that. The fact that I was carrying around 8 extra liters of fluid that they thought was related to twin-to-twin transfusion that ended up being about something else, which I think we'll get to. Yeah. All of those things, I think, created a picture for them that made almost everybody pretty nervous. right?
And I just want to interject. You did not hear her incorrectly. She did say 8 extra liters of fluid. So we are going to get to that still. I'm like,
how many sodas?
8? We said it was 4 of like those 2 liters of like,
4 2-liter
soda
pop
when you order
things
so.
when you go to a picnic.
Yeah.
4 of those. And then 10 pounds of baby.
Yeah.
Right?
So like a day later, really the induction is what it's, I don't like the word fail, but you're
stalling.
failing.
I think it's stalling, right? Because at this point, I think we doubled the amount of Pitocin, and so the doctor comes in and he's like, you're still not really effaced. And I had some visitors at that point who came, and you were still with us, and it was like, I'm not willing to concede anymore on the amount of medicine that you're pumping into my body, because I knew I had enough self-awareness, body awareness, that this wasn't going anywhere. So I was like, I want the Pitocin stopped. If we stop the Pitocin, whatever faux labor we're having right now is going to stop. I knew that clearly.
Yeah.
So
and this is so important for people to hear. If your body is not ready for labor, there is no amount of Pitocin that they can give you that's going to make you go into labor.
Right.
So if your body's ready, absolutely.
Things will happen.
So it's really good that you had that, kind of awareness, and that you were willing to like listen to the medical community too.
Yeah. So I think I asked him, I said, is the preeclampsia still a concern? Because now we're on day 2.5 and there's
blurry
no more
vision, still high blood pressure.
Pitocin to get, like, I don't want to be pumped full of these drugs. Is the preeclampsia still a concern? He's like, yeah. I said, okay. So I remember we asked everybody to leave. Bo and I talked about it. I was concerned because Bo, it really does have a phobia and a fear and anxiety around operations, needles, all of that stuff. And I knew that we were going to be leaving an environment that was sort of homey, right? That we had the diffuser going. We had like our own pillows. It was pseudo comfortable to this very cold clinical environment. And so I said, can you do this? Like, do you want to do this? Do we want to have these babies now? I just don't, this isn't going to happen naturally right now. And if the preeclampsia is still a concern, they're not going to let me go. Like, this is it. And so we decided together that we would just elect to have a C-section. I don't know that I would ever say that.
I don't know if I would call it elect. It was indicated. It was indicated. And whether you made control of that decision earlier, but in 2 hours later,
we were headed that way. I'm pretty sure
they
we
may
were
have
headed
come
that
in
way.
and said,
yeah. And I kind of wanted it on my own terms. I didn't want to be in an emergent situation where they might have decided to put me out. Like I needed to. I wanted, if we were going to go that route, I wanted it to be on our terms.
Yeah.
So we said, let's just have these babies. And the doctor said, I think you're making the right call, and I think later he said my cervix was pretty far back and the babies were behind that. And so it would have made complications. I forgot this until I read the notes last night. And I think it's probably because they never said it to me when they pulled Ethan. They had another medical intervention that we had while we were laboring is that they stripped my membranes with Ethan. So Ethan was baby A. And while that felt great, like it relieved a little bit of pressure, still nothing, right? Yeah. So we went and I had the epidural in the operating room. Heidi, you got to be a part of it, which doesn't normally happen. So I'd love to hear like your take on it. But anyway, so they
took you back to the operating room. They took me
back to the operating room.
And then placed the epidural. Do you remember that process?
Yeah, that was the only pain I felt all day, like through the whole thing. I was like, oh, I feel that. And she's like, try not to move. I was like, I'm so sorry. That's painful. And that was it. Like that literally, I think, is the only pain I felt leading up to my birth.
But your body responded well to the anesthesia. Like you felt numb.
Yeah, I felt numb. But I still had like, upper body awareness.
Do you remember feeling nauseous?
I don't remember feeling nauseous. I think there was this relative calm for me. People were coming into the room. There were a lot of people. So with twin births, each baby gets assigned its own team. So small room. There were at least a dozen people, I think, in that room.
If I remember correctly, yeah. And Bo and I were trying to stay kind of out of their way up at your head. But you did have an overwhelming sense of peace and calmness.
Thank you.
To you.
Yeah. So Bo, they sat, and again, Bo's really nervous. So they sat him right close to me. And so we just were watching each other the whole time. And when they pulled Ethan out, this is what I don't remember. And I don't think anybody told me the umbilical cord was wrapped twice around Ethan's neck.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
I remember, yes, because I went where I probably am not supposed to go, but I went to the other side of the curtain because
so you could see it.
So for audience members listening, this was the very first time that I had the opportunity to be in the operating room.
Right.
Not all doulas get that privilege. So I had never seen a C-section, and I was really curious. So I just remember being like, "Bye, Sean. Like, Bo's got you."
Yeah.
And I was on the other side of that curtain, watching that whole process go down. And so it was really amazing to see the inside of your uterus
body
and your organs.
You said it was like its own type of birth. That you said they created a canal.
They actually did. They have a ring, and I'm not sure what this medical contraption is called, but it's a ring. Maybe we'll put it in the show notes. But it's a ring that kind of opened up your skin and uterus, and it looked like, because I've seen many vaginal births, it really did look like a normal birth opening. It was really miraculous.
Right.
So
Ethan was baby A, 12-18, within the same
very tight cord wrap
minute. Zach was born. They broke his water and then delivered him in the same minute.
So let's talk about that water breaking. I don't exactly remember if they broke. Was it just one sac then?
Yeah, because
so then they had to break
it. They had stripped his membranes in the delivery room, right? So remember we had this concern that there was twin-to-twin transfusion. I was carrying a lot of liquid on just one side, a lot of fluid on just one side. Well, it turns out that there were 8 liters of fluid.
And it was on Zach.
It was on Zach, baby B. And the reason is he was born with an esophageal fistula. So his throat never connected to his stomach. So in utero, he never had the ability to process. He couldn't do that. So he was sitting
at a rapid rate.
At a very rapid rate in all that amniotic fluid, which is why they thought the twin-to-twin thing was a concern, because usually when you gain a lot of weight or they think, turns out it was that he just didn't have a throat to process it.
So say the term again.
Esophageal, so referring to the esophagus or the throat, fistula. And it was a birth defect that happened, they say, around 3 weeks. So it was before I even knew that I was pregnant with them. Wow. It's not common, but there's a common fix for it. And so generally the surgery is immediate, and it takes 6 to 8 weeks generally for little kids to recover from it.
So I want to get to that story in just a minute, but
let's go back
I feel like we left our listeners on edge a little bit. So let's talk about the fluid.
Yes,
so
the fluid.
Sean's laying on the bed. So I'm not really sure
down.
You're aware of.
I heard everybody go, whoa, like a collective whoa in the room. And Bo's at my head, and it's the first time he broke my gaze with me, and he looks down, he's like, is that all supposed to be there?
Yes. So there was standing amniotic fluid, standing amniotic fluid on the operating floor. That is not normal.
There's a container that they put
it
on
overflowed.
The table, and you're supposed to fill that up, right? And they actually use that, I think, for the medical notes to measure it. So it filled that up.
It overflowed.
It spilled. All the nurses were like, "What?" And there was some sort of nervous laughter in the room. So you're strapped. The mom is strapped down. You don't really see anything. There's that curtain up. I wasn't nervous because the laughter made it sort of a lighthearted moment, and I knew I wasn't surprised. It wasn't like, what's happening? I was like, oh, there was a lot of fluid. Yeah.
Did you feel a relief of pressure, as if a balloon had popped?
It
or
did feel like a balloon popping. It was all of a sudden I felt weightless for just a millisecond, and it was like I had peed my pants like I had never peed my pants before. Okay. It was
a sense of relief.
Yeah, and it literally was. I think it made that sound. It was like, And then it hits the tile floor, so it makes a sound there. And people were just like beside themselves. And so, Bo, myself, and Heidi have no idea that this is out of the norm until we hear the nervous laughter. And then I think later, right, when you were getting dressed out of your scrubs, you were with the nurses, and they said,
well,
do you remember that?
I just remember that they were like, we have literally never seen this amount of amniotic fluid. And then they because it overflowed so much, they estimated it at 8 to 10 liters. And I was like, that can't even be right. I mean, I just remember counting the liter bottles and then thinking of your stomach and thinking, wow, yeah, it just...
So, y'all, I was huge is what we're trying to say is I was huge. I had to walk into a store, and I was probably around 34, 35 weeks, and people just glazed over with panic. They thought I was going to have these children, in aisle 8 of Harris Teeter.
Whew. And I just remember, so Ethan was born, Zach was born immediately. Mm-hmm. And I think this is really cool with the numbers. So they were born on 12-12. 12-12. Oh, sorry, 12-12.
The last time that'll ever happen.
And they're, and they're twins. So I just remember thinking, I just remember thinking whoa, this is a spiritual, awakening that's happening. Right. And I remember right away they put the babies, and I'm taking over a little bit because now you're laying on your back getting stitched up.
Right, I don't see any
so
of this.
They took, Bo and I were able to see Zach and Ethan, and they put them in their little bassinets and under the lights. And right away they noticed that something wasn't right with Zach.
Right, so, they weren't saying very much.
They weren't saying much, but I remember, and Bo and I remember hearing that his sound was very different than Ethan's sound. Mm-hmm. So those first few cries and breaths and stuff. But then we kind of got, whisked away to go back to the room, and they were going to take you to recovery for 4 hours. And so then I want you to take over and then tell us kind of where your journey or your inauguration of motherhood started.
So I'll say, even though I had, this vision of a water birth and all of these things, I think that
that was a water birth.
Well, different kind of water birth, right? I had all these visions and those didn't come to fruition. But I feel that I still had a very serene and calm birth, even though it was in sort of the confines of a medical operating table. And so I don't mourn the loss of what could have been a birth, or it didn't feel like a traumatic experience. Now that might be because of the subsequent stuff that happened with Zach afterwards, right? And no one told me about Ethan until I read it later. So I think that was probably a saving grace, right? I was never worried about Ethan, and probably needed to be, but I wasn't. So I recover in the recovery room, which is the size of a small closet. It was ridiculous. And then I get some skin to skin time with both of them after they had their baths. And then we get wheeled to our room. And I remember they said, we're going to take Zach up. He's still having some trouble getting warm. We're going to take him up to the nursery, I think is what they said, or the NICU to warm him up and just run some more tests on him. But it was just presented in sort of a standard operating type of situation.
No need to alarm you.
No need to alarm you. This is my first pregnancy. I don't know what to expect. We had kind of already adopted this open attitude of, roll with the punches kind of thing. And I'm also coming off of some major drugs, right? So things are not operating clearly for me anyway. Bo is at this point really sleep deprived because he's been up the whole time. He went with the babies to have their first bath when they got them cleaned up. So he is finally sleeping, I think, for the first time in over 2 days. Yeah. And I remember it was early morning hours, 3, 4, and a doctor came in, and I knew it was serious. And so she comes in, Bo's asleep. We don't wake him up. And she's telling me words, and I'm struggling to process them. And so she was kind enough to write it on an index card, esophageal fistula. And she said he's going to need surgery. And at this point, I'm just so overwhelmed. I've had 2 babies. I've only got one of them in my hand. I'm able to do skin to skin with Ethan. I am recovering from major surgery, which, by the way, I never really even registered that was a serious surgery. Like, it never came, the preeclampsia concerns I knew were concerns. The C-section I know is a major surgery. I don't have any recollection of being in pain after the surgery or like what my own needs were at that point. And I think it's because the twins, more primarily Zach, right? So
welcome to being a mom.
Welcome to being a mom. So that was like, hey, you're a mom, and day one, you're a mom in crisis.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was.
Do you remember how long it was before you were reconnected with Zach?
After like the initial skin to skin time?
Yeah. Like when they took him and to diagnose him and then had to go surgery.
It was right before surgery.
Oh, it's okay. Now we're both crying.
Yeah.
Love you.
Love you too. Right before surgery, I got wheeled up. He was connected to all these tubes. I should say, he's in the NICU. They're tiny preemies, like gorgeous little preemies. And he was born 5 pounds, 12 ounces. So for a twin baby, he's a big, he's a healthy size. So he looks like this giant butterball compared to all the other all the other babies that are in the room. And he is hooked up to all these tubes, but he's not in the incubator. Like he wasn't in a glass container where I couldn't put my hands in, kind of thing. But I was they were like, you can pick him up. And I didn't, because I was so afraid of messing something up, right? He's got a tube that's breathing for him. He's got a tube that's feeding him, I don't even think he was eating yet because he needed surgery, right? And so those are my first sort of memories of Zach are these sort of, yeah. So, Bo really kind of became the anchor point. Like it kind of became this division of labor immediately. I was taking care of Ethan. Bo was with Zach. So I didn't see much of Bo. We didn't have a lot of time to process together the birth story. It was just sort of like we immediately, without even vocalizing it, I clearly, because I was stuck to a hospital bed, had to, we just kind of unspokenly did this thing where every waking moment Zach was going to be, taken care of by Bo. Bo would rush down and check on me, hold Ethan for like 30 minutes to an hour, make sure I'd eaten, and run back up. This is why I think I was not paying attention to anything about my C-section. And like, I just didn't feel that much pain. How could I? So he has surgery as a day old. They tell us, so he was born on the 12th. They tell us like, and the hard part is Ethan could not go into the NICU. So I never got the twin experience until after Zach came home, because I could never hold them together. And I had these like, all right, we got to figure out how to nurse 2 babies at the same time. That was not the case. I was nursing Ethan, and Zach was getting his nourishment from formula and machines.
And I'm sure it was never part of like your vision that you were going to go home with one baby. And
only one baby.
And only one baby.
Yeah.
And leave one behind.
Which is right? Like, we knew that there was a chance that we'd have them prematurely. We knew that there was a chance that they were going to there would be a hospital or NICU stay. It never occurred to me that it would be one, or like that what happened to one was not going to happen to the other one. So it blindsided us. So they said, you don't expect them home for Christmas. It's usually a 6 to 8 week recovery. The surgery went beautifully well. We were taken care of beautifully by our friends and our family. I don't think that I spent much time with Zach, like in hindsight, because I was recovering from a C-section. I remember once Bo came down. He's like, do you want to see him? And I said, yes. But Bo looked so haggard. I was like, will you just lay down and will you just do skin to skin and we'll get a nurse to take me? So we call for a nurse. It literally took 45 minutes. They were so busy for a nurse to wheel me up there. And so we'd been waiting for 45 minutes just so that someone could take me, because I couldn't walk up to see my son. And I spent some time with him. And every time I spent time with him, I'm like a mess. And so I'm holding him. This is post-surgery. I'm holding him and I'm a mess. And I'm
Could he nurse?
Mm-mm.
No.
Mm-mm. He was, so after surgery,
he had a
feed tube
okay.
feeding him. And they had to do swallow studies to make sure, right? Because it's his throat, to make sure. And so he was eating in teeny tiny increments, and they were testing to make sure. It was the swallow study that I think he needed to pass, among other things, before he could ever come home. So I remember I was like, I'm not waiting another 45 minutes to get back down to Bo and Ethan. So I took my wheelchair and I used it like a walker.
Yeah.
I can't even describe the amount of pain I was in. And I think at this point I wasn't taking pain meds. Like, I think I've torn my ACL before. Doctors have said, you seem to have a high threshold for pain. The contraction's not reading, right? Yeah. I think I have a high threshold for pain. So that was the most excruciating pain I've ever been in. Using my wheelchair as a walker to walk down to the hallway, get into the elevator, go down to the maternity ward, and come back to the room. I collapsed into bed, bawling. And I think at that point it was like a cathartic release for everything that was happening. We go home, but we only go home with one baby. Bo's taking shifts visiting, and then we go up, but he's holding Ethan in the family waiting room of the NICU, and then I go in. So we never, like, Bo and I never got a chance to be with Zach, just the two of us, except for right before surgery. We were there together with a whole host of medical teams. So it wasn't like this private moment. But then the greatest, most beautiful Christmas miracle happened. Zach is like the strongest fighter we know. And they called us and they said, you can come pick him up. And it was Christmas Eve. So it only was 2 weeks, the 12th to the 24th. They were like, this is the fastest recovery we've ever seen.
I think your Costa Rican relatives were sending some major Catholic prayers.
Vibes, yeah, for sure. I mean, everybody was on, I had my good friend Diane, who's a chaplain, come, and she had baptized him because we just weren't sure what was going to happen. And but we got him home on Christmas Eve. And I remember we were like giddy school kids. And we propped them up in their little, like, bassinet in the living room. And Bo and I slept intermittently, right, on the floor, Christmas Eve.
Was that the first time you nursed Zach?
It was the first. No, that's not true. In recovery, when they moved him to, like, the healthy NICU side,
they removed the tube.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was not, it was like I was bottle feeding him because I couldn't nurse him. I pumped and then would feed him that because they needed to measure how much he was getting and they needed to see if he was swallowing. Yeah. So babies who are born at 37 weeks don't know how to nurse anyway. So that was a whole other like podcast issue of like, how do you
Maybe we'll have you back on the podcast.
Yeah, breastfeeding.
Breastfeeding twins. I think that would be like a really good topic for everybody.
I finally nailed it, but it was, I mean, Ethan too I was seeing a lactation consultant. This is crazy. Like, take Ethan to the lactation consultant, take Ethan by himself to his first pediatrician appointment, go see Zach, have our meetings with the medical team there. Like, Zach finally comes home. I'm having meetings with the lactation consultant about Zach at the hospital. Like, finally, like, come home. I think that's why when everybody was home and people were like, do you need help? I was like, no, I got this. Because it was the first time I had an opportunity to just mother my two children at home.
And you wanted that sacred space.
I wanted that time, yeah. And I think it also, it made the twin thing easier. Like, I think I extended myself a lot of grace because I kept saying, well, I only have two hands. I only have two boobs. I only have, like, I saw my friends with single parents beat themselves up for this ideal notion of what motherhood looks like and miss that mark, which is mythology anyway. And I think they were hard on themselves. And I think I was like, well, I got twins and this one, was in the NICU struggling for life, so I did a load of laundry and I watched the hair on my kids grow. I rocked it out today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So I was going to say, like, here at the end of the podcast, I like to ask, like, what is your advice for moms of multiples?
Yeah.
And moms whose babies go to the NICU. Like, if you can pass along some sage advice, like, what would you say to those that are coming after you?
So I think in the birth planning process, be open to whatever story it might be. And I think that you can control the emotions. So like I said, I would have never wanted a C-section delivery birth for myself. It is totally 100% okay. It was as serene a birth as anybody could have in an operating room in that environment. I don't have any regrets about that. So I think that there's sort of a posture of just being open. If you have a child that's in the NICU, I think that you have to invest in self-care after that baby comes home, because I don't think it matters what it is that lands that child there. I think it's a traumatic experience, and I think that there is a lot of processing and unpacking that has to happen afterwards, and it happens slowly and over time. So don't set unhealthy expectations for yourself about what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah. Thank you for that, because I think it's really important that we remind moms and give moms permission for self-care and to not feel guilty about that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I still every Christmas Eve get really choked up at the story. Zach still, like, if it looks like he's like got a chip in his throat that's like scratching him, you know what I mean? Like, it's not really a risk. I hold my breath. Like,
it's a trigger.
It's a trigger, right? And they will never not be a trigger. And there's just an existence, I think, that mothers have with children who've gone through traumatic experiences, and it's relative. So, like, I have friends whose kids have been born who've needed heart surgery right away, right? I've had 2 good friends whose kids have had heart transplants already. It is relative. Like, the trauma exists even if your child was in the NICU for a week. Yeah. Like, it doesn't matter.
Take care of even if you have a completely healthy baby.
Yeah,
take care of yourself.
And that looks I recognize what that might look like for you in the early stages. Is that sleeping when they sleep and giving yourself permission to do that, and not the dishes or the laundry or I think it might be different if you've got other siblings in the home, but it's still vitally important that you carve that out. Say yes to the help when offered, and be directive. Like, say, I know you want to hold this baby right now, but what would really help me is if you could just start a load of laundry. And if you can start the load of laundry, then I promise you can hold the baby. Or come and let me just take a bath. Yeah. Hold my kid so I just can take a bath.
And I will say, Sean practices what she preaches, because when I had my baby, she came over and did my dishes. I don't think you even know. Well, no, you nursed him. I'm sorry. That's another podcast for another day. But yes, you came over and did my dishes. And I was quite thankful for that. So as we close out, favorite baby products, like when you look back 6 years ago, was there something that you were like, oh, this was my go-to?
I mean, those damn swings, the little baby swings. Yeah. My children slept in that a lot.
Yep. And you had 2 of them side by side.
I had 2 of them side by side. Yeah. We could do a whole podcast on like what you need and what you don't need. You don't have to buy 2 of everything. That's just going to junk up your house.
Do you remember what the brand of the swing was?
I think it was like the Graco Little Lamb.
That is what it was.
It's the cocoon one, right? Yeah. And so you place the baby. It's very cute.
It's got a little mobile above it.
And for us, we swaddled with arms out, and the swaddles were pretty vital.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sean. It was awesome. Me. Like, you're my bestie, I was part of the story. So I feel like a cheater asking you all these questions, but it was really beautiful to relive it with you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for coming on. And we're gonna do part 2 with Sean on nursing multiples.
Sure.
You should see your face right now. That's amazing.
Oh God. I mean, nursing them until 2. You want to talk about that? We're going
to talk about all of it.
All of it.
All right. We hope everybody has an awesome day or night, whatever you're listening. Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan and prepare for the birth you want, no matter what that looks like. If you're enjoying this podcast, then I need your help to spread the word. If you know anyone who is pregnant, is trying to become pregnant, or just loves a good birth story, if you could send them to iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify